The transport shuttle landed with a soft hiss on the crystal platform of Nexus Prime. Through the viewport, Minji Park could see the massive towers of the Galactic Academy reaching toward the purple sky. Each tower was made of materials she had never seen before. They seemed to glow with their own inner light. Minji gripped the handle of her small bag tighter. Inside were her few belongings from Earth, a change of clothes, her father's old military dog tags, a photo of her family. Nothing fancy or high-tech like the other students probably had. The shuttle door opened and Minji stepped out onto the platform. The air felt different here. It was clean and had a sweet smell like flowers, but it also felt thin, making her breathe a little harder. The gravity was lighter too. Each step felt like she was floating just a bit. Other students were arriving on different shuttles. Minji watched them and felt her heart sink. They all looked so advanced. One student had blue skin and 4 arms. Another was tall and thin with silver eyes that seemed to glow. A third student floated a few inches off the ground without any visible technology. They all had expensive-looking equipment too. Floating bags that followed them around. Clothes that seemed to change colors. Devices that projected holograms in the air. Minji looked down at her simple Earth clothes and felt very small. Human student report to orientation hall. A voice announced from speakers built into the platform. The voice spoke perfect English but had a strange musical quality to it. Minji followed the signs through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls showed moving pictures of different planets and star systems. Students walked past her in groups talking in languages she had never heard before. Some of them looked at her with curiosity. Others seemed to ignore her completely. The orientation hall was enormous. It could have held 1,000 people easily. Minji found a seat near the back and tried to make herself small. Around her, alien students chatted with each other like old friends. Many of them probably were old friends coming from the same planets or systems. A tall figure walked onto the stage at the front of the hall. He had gray skin and wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid metal. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire hall without any microphone. "Welcome students to another year at the Galactic Academy," Principal Vorlak said. His eyes swept over the crowd and seemed to pause when they found Minji. "This year we have students from 12 different worlds. We also have our first exchange, student from Earth." Minji felt hundreds of alien eyes turn to look at her. Her face burned with embarrassment. She wanted to disappear into her seat. "The human will be placed in standard classes," Vorlak continued, "though we do not expect the same level of performance as our other students. Humans are still a very young species. They have only just developed space travel and basic energy weapons. We must be patient with their limitations." The words stung. Minji knew humans were not as advanced as these other species, but hearing it said so casually made her feel worthless. After the orientation, students began finding their dormitories and meeting their roommates. Minji was assigned to a single room. She understood why when she saw how the other students were paired up. The blue-skinned student was roomed with another 4-armed alien. The floating student was with someone else from his world. Minji was different. She was alone. Her room was small but comfortable. The bed adjusted itself to her body when she sat on it. The walls could display any scenery she wanted. She chose a view of Earth from space, showing the blue and green planets she had left behind. The next morning brought her first classes. Minji found her way to advanced galactic history and stood in the doorway. The classroom was filled with students, already seated and talking. The instructor, a being with tentacles instead of arms, looked up when she entered. "Ah, the human," Instructor Zelan said. The tentacles moved in patterns as he spoke. "You will sit there in the corner. The material may be too difficult for your species to understand, but you may observe and learn what you can." He pointed to a desk in the far corner of the room, away from all the other students. Minji walked over and sat down, feeling every pair of eyes watching her. The students around her were impressive. There was Jiho, whose people came from Altair. His species had developed faster than light travel 2,000 years ago. Sitting near him was Hana, a Centaurian known for their incredible intelligence. Her people had solved mathematics that humans were still working on. Dongyun was from Vega, and his species was famous for their diplomatic skills. They had helped create the peace treaties that ended the last great galactic war. Sunwoo came, from Arcturus, where his people had developed mind-reading abilities. Yuna was from Rigel, and her species built machines that could think for themselves. And then there was Minji from Earth, where the most advanced thing they had was computers and nuclear power. The lesson began with a discussion of the hegemony, wars that happened 300 years ago. Instructor Zelon showed holographic battles in the center of the room. Massive fleets fought among the stars while planets burned below. The Drakmiri Empire made a critical error in their attack on the Nexus Coalition, Zelon explained. Can anyone tell me what it was? Several tentacles shot up. Jiho was called on first. They spread their forces too thin across multiple systems, he said confidently. Correct, but incomplete, Zelon replied. Anyone else? Hana raised her hand. They failed to secure their supply lines. Also correct, but still not the main issue. The class continued guessing. Political mistakes, technology failures, poor timing. But none of the answers seemed to satisfy Zealand completely. Minji studied the holographic battle display. Something bothered her about the Drakmiri formation. It looked familiar somehow. Like something she had seen before in her father's old military books. Without thinking, she raised her hand. The classroom went silent. Even Zelon seemed surprised. Yes, human student? Minji's voice was quiet but steady. They left their command ships unprotected in the rear. The formation looks like they expected a traditional battle, but the coalition used hit-and-run tactics. The Drakmiri were set up to fight an enemy that would meet them head-on, not one that would attack from behind and retreat. The silence stretched, longer. Zelon's tentacles moved in what might have been surprise or confusion. That is, surprisingly accurate, he said slowly. The Drakmiri were indeed unprepared for asymmetric warfare. Around her, Minji could feel the other students looking at her differently. Not with respect exactly, but with a new kind of wariness. She had shown she could think about war in ways they had not expected, but instead of bringing her closer to her classmates, it seemed to push them further away. When class ended and students filed out, they gave her corner seat a wider space than before. Minji packed up her simple notebook and pencil. She was the last to leave the classroom, walking, out alone just as she had walked in. The second week at the Galactic Academy was harder than the first. Minji had hoped that after her correct answer in history class, some students might want to talk to her. Instead, they seemed more uncomfortable around her than before. In advanced mathematics, Professor Quillex assigned quantum probability equations. The other students solved them using neural processors built into their brains or advanced calculating devices. Minji struggled with her simple pencil and paper. The numbers made no sense to her. She could not understand how probability could exist in multiple states at the same time. But when the class moved to tactical simulations, something changed. The professor showed them a complex battle scenario with 3 fleets positioned around a space station. Each fleet had different strengths and weaknesses. The goal was to capture the station with minimum losses. The alien students approached it like a math problem. They calculated firepower ratios and analyzed shield frequencies. Their solutions were elegant and followed all the rules of civilized warfare. Minji looked at the scenario differently. She saw patterns her father had taught her from old Earth military history. The way armies moved, how supply lines worked, what happened when you cut off an enemy's retreat. When Professor Quillex called on her, she pointed to the smallest fleet. This one attacks first, but not the station. They hit the supply ships behind the largest fleet. When the big fleet turns around to protect their supplies, the middle fleet attacks the station from the side. The small fleet retreats, making the big fleet chase them. Then both attacking fleets hit the station together, while the biggest fleet is out of position. The holographic display showed her strategy playing out. The station fell in half the time of the other solutions, with much fewer losses. Professor Quillex stared at the results. Interesting approach, very primitive, but effective. The word primitive hung in the air like a bad smell. The other students shifted in their seats. Minji realized she had made another mistake. Her different way of thinking was not impressive. To them, it was disturbing. During lunch, she sat alone at a small table near the windows. The cafeteria was full of groups of students from the same worlds, eating foods that looked nothing like anything from Earth. Minji ate her simple human rations and watched the alien students laugh and talk together. She tried to join a study group once. 5 students were working on a project about galactic trade routes. When Minji approached their table, the conversation stopped. "We are discussing complex economic theory," said Hana, the Centaurian girl. "It requires understanding of multidimensional market forces." "I could try to help," Minji offered. "On Earth, I studied economics and trade patterns." The students looked at each other. "Earth economics is very simple," said Jiho politely. "Your planet only trades with itself. We are dealing with systems that span dozens of worlds." Minji felt her face burn. "Maybe I could learn from watching? It would be better if you found a project more suited to your level," Sunwoo said. His people could sense emotions, and Minji knew he could feel her embarrassment. That somehow made it worse. She walked away and found an empty corner of the library. The next day, she noticed the study group had moved to a different part of the cafeteria, away from where she usually sat. In her 3rd week, the pattern became clear. Wherever Minji sat in class, empty seats appeared around her like ripples in water. If she sat in the front row, students moved to the back. If she chose the left side, they gathered on the right. It was not mean exactly. No one was cruel to her or called her names. They were just uncomfortable, like she was a puzzle they could not solve, so they decided to avoid her completely. The worst part was laboratory assignments. In xenobiology class, students were supposed to work in pairs to study alien plant samples. When Professor Threnax called out partner assignments, she was always left over. "The human will work alone," the professor would announce. "The specimens may be too dangerous for someone without proper neural shielding." Minji knew this was not true. The plants were harmless, but it gave everyone an excuse to avoid partnering with her. Working alone, she made interesting discoveries. While other students used advanced scanners to analyze the plants, Minji relied on careful observation with simple tools. She noticed things the scanners missed: the way leaves changed color when touched, how roots grew in specific patterns, small details that the high-tech equipment ignored. Her reports were always accurate, but they were written in simple language without complex scientific terms. Professors marked them as adequate but unsophisticated. The isolation began to affect her sleep. At night, she lay in her small room looking at the image of Earth on her wall. She missed her family. She missed having friends. She missed being around people who understood her. But she also felt angry. These students and teachers thought they were so advanced, but they could not think outside their perfect systems. They solved every problem the same way, using the same tools, following the same patterns. During a lesson on diplomatic negotiations, Instructor Zelon presented a crisis scenario. 2 alien races were fighting over mining rights to an asteroid field. Previous attempts at peace talks had failed. The class suggested the usual solutions: trade agreements, neutral mediators, sharing of resources based on mathematical formulas. Minji raised her hand again, knowing it would make things worse, but unable to stop herself. "What if the problem is not about the asteroids?" she said. "What if they are fighting because they need to prove they are strong? Sometimes people fight not because they want something, but because not fighting makes them look weak to their own people." Zelon's tentacles moved in patterns that meant confusion. "That is a very emotional approach to diplomacy. Maybe that is what they need," Minji replied. "A solution that lets both sides feel like they won something important, even if they have to share the asteroids." The class was quiet for a long moment. Then Donghyun, the vegan student known for diplomatic skills, spoke up. "That is actually not a terrible idea," he said slowly. "My people sometimes structure agreements to save face for all parties. But instead of agreement, Minji saw worry in his eyes. And she understood. Her ideas were not just different. They were the kind of different that made people wonder what else humans might think of, what other strange solutions they might come up with. By the end of the third week, Minji's corner seat was surrounded by empty desks in every class. Students walked around her table in the cafeteria like it was an island. Even the teachers seemed uncomfortable calling on her. She was completely alone. But somehow she was also learning to see things no one else could see. And deep down, she knew that someday, that might be exactly what everyone needed. The field trip was supposed to be the highlight of the semester. 200 students and 20 faculty members aboard the Academy ship Luminous Dawn, traveling to the edge of known space to study ancient stellar phenomena. For most students, it was an adventure. For Minji, it was just another place to be alone. She found a seat by herself near the back of the observation deck. Through the massive windows, she watched stars streak past as the ship jumped through hyperspace. The other students clustered in their usual groups, pointing excitedly at displays showing their route through space. "We will be observing the Nexus Nebula," announced Captain Nexlar, a dignified Altarian with silver skin. "It is one of the oldest formations in this sector. The energy readings there are unlike anything in our databases." The journey took 3 days. Minji spent most of the time in her small cabin or in the ship's library, reading about stellar mechanics and ancient space phenomena. She ate her meals quickly and alone, avoiding the main dining hall where groups of students laughed and socialized. On the third day, alarms began to sound. Minji was in the observation deck when the ship suddenly lurched to one side. Emergency. Lights began flashing red. Students who had been floating or flying fell to the floor. Others cried out in languages Minji did not recognize. Captain Nexlar's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All students report to designated safe areas immediately. We have encountered an unknown energy field. All systems are experiencing malfunctions." The lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but it was dim and flickering. The artificial gravity became unstable, making everyone feel lighter and heavier in alternating waves. Minji heard crying from several directions. Many of the alien students had never experienced a real emergency before. Their lives had been safe and protected, surrounded by advanced technology that always worked perfectly. She moved through the corridors, using her hands to feel along the walls. The ship's layout was logical, and she had studied the emergency maps during the boring journey. Other students stumbled around in panic, but Minji found her way easily. In the main gathering area, she found chaos. Students huddled in groups, some crying, others arguing about what to do. The advanced technology they all relied on was not working. Their floating bags had crashed to the floor. Their holographic devices showed only static. Their communication implants could not reach their home worlds. "The engines are completely dead," reported Professor Quillex to Captain Nexlar. "Whatever this energy field is, it has drained all our power systems." "What about emergency systems?" the captain asked. "Basic life support is functioning, but we have no propulsion, no long-range communications, and no defensive systems." Captain Nexlar looked around at the frightened students. "Send a distress signal using the manual beacon. Someone will find us." But Minji had been reading about this region of space in the ship's library. She knew they were at the very edge of explored territory. It could be weeks before anyone found them. And there were other dangers in deep space besides being lost. She approached Captain Nexlar quietly. "Sir, I read about this area in your database. Ships have disappeared here before." The captain looked down at her with tired eyes. "What do you mean, human child?" "There are reports of raiders, ships that attack disabled vessels. They are called void hunters." Captain Nexlar's silver skin seemed to grow paler. "Those are just stories told to frighten young cadets." The reports seemed real to me, Minji said, "and if we are broadcasting a distress signal, they will know we are helpless." Before the captain could respond, new alarms began sounding. The ship's sensors, running on emergency power, had detected something approaching. "Multiple contacts," reported the navigation officer. "Unknown configuration. They are moving to surround us." Through the observation windows, Minji could see dark shapes against the stars. The ships were angular and strange, like weapons designed to look frightening. They moved with predatory grace, circling the disabled Academy ship. "Void hunters," Captain Nexlar whispered. "They are real." The alien students who heard this began to panic worse than before. The Void Hunters were legendary among spacefaring peoples. They appeared from nowhere to attack disabled ships, taking anything valuable and leaving no survivors. But Minji felt something different than fear. She felt focused, alert. Like some part of her brain that had been sleeping was waking up. This was danger, real and immediate. And somehow that made her calm. She began moving through the groups of students, checking for injuries and counting supplies. While others froze in terror, she acted. It was not that she was braver. It was that fear made her think more clearly instead of less clearly. "How many emergency food supplies do we have?" she asked a faculty member. I do not know. Why does that matter now? Because we need to know how long we can survive, and we need to organize before they board the ship." "Board the ship?" The professor looked horrified. Minji looked through the window at the circling hunter ships. "They will not just leave us alone. They are predators. They hunt disabled ships. That is what they do." Captain Nexlar overheard her. "You think they will attack?" "I know they will," Minji said. "The question is what we do when they come aboard." The other students and faculty looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. The idea of fighting back seemed impossible to them. They were educated beings, not warriors. But Minji was thinking like her father had taught her, about terrain and resources, about the enemy's expectations and weaknesses, about survival. "Captain," she said, "what kind of weapons do we have?" "Weapons? This is an educational vessel, not a warship. No weapons at all. Some basic security equipment. Energy, barriers, restraint fields. Nothing that would stop raiders." Minji nodded. She had not expected military weapons anyway. But there were other kinds of weapons if you knew how to think about them. "What about the ship's layout? Are there areas that could be defended?" Captain Nexlar was beginning to understand her thinking. "The central core has only a few access points. We could seal the emergency bulkheads." "Good. Get everyone there. Seal it tight." "And then what?" Minji looked out at the hunter ships again. They were closer now, preparing to dock. "Then we wait. And when they come looking for us, we make them wish they had picked a different ship to hunt." The captain stared at her. "You are just a child, a student." "Yes," Minji agreed. "But I am also human. And humans know about hunting." For the first time since arriving at the academy, Minji saw an alien look at her with something other than pity or discomfort. Captain Nexlar looked at her with hope. Outside the windows, the Void Hunter ships attached themselves to the Academy vessel like parasites. Soon, the real test would begin. The sound of cutting tools echoed through the ship's hull. The Void Hunters were breaking through the outer airlocks exactly as Minji had predicted. She crouched in the maintenance tunnel above the main corridor, watching the sealed blast doors that protected the central core where the students and faculty were hiding. She was not hiding with them. Someone needed to slow the raiders down, and she was the only one who understood what needed to be done. The ship's maintenance android, Unit 47, floated beside her. Its original programming was to fix broken equipment, but Minji had found ways to expand its usefulness. "Unit 47, can you make the lights in sections C through F flicker on and off randomly?" she whispered. "That would serve no maintenance purpose," the android replied in its neutral voice. "It would confuse intruders who are trying to navigate the ship." The android processed this for a moment. Confusion of hostile entities could be considered a maintenance function for crew safety, activating random lighting patterns. Minji smiled. She had learned that artificial intelligences could be very literal, but also very helpful if you asked the right questions. The first group of Void Hunters broke through the outer door. They were tall and thin, with dark armor that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but Minji could see their movements were confident and practiced. They had done this many times before. They expected to find terrified, students cowering in corners begging for mercy. Instead, they found empty corridors and flickering lights. The ship seemed abandoned, Minji watched them spread out to search. There were 12 in the first group, moving in pairs. They carried energy weapons and scanning devices, professional raiders who knew their business, but they did not know humans. Minji waited until the last pair of hunters passed beneath her hiding spot. Then she dropped down silently behind them, moving like her father had taught her during their camping trips on Earth. The Void Hunters were looking forward, searching for victims. They did not expect danger from behind. She did not try to fight them directly. That would be stupid. Instead, she used Unit 47 to seal the blast door behind them, trapping them in the section. Then she activated the emergency fire suppression system, filling the area with thick foam that made it impossible to see or move quickly. The trapped hunters shouted in their harsh language, but their words were muffled by the foam. More importantly, their friends could hear them but could not reach them quickly. Minji was already moving to her next position. The ship's art gallery had become a maze of debris and furniture, all carefully arranged to channel attackers into narrow spaces where their numbers would not help them. The gymnasium had been converted into a medical area, but it also controlled the ship's artificial gravity generators. Through the ship's communication system, she heard Captain Nexlar's voice speaking to the raiders. "This is Captain Nexlar of the Academy ship Luminous Dawn. We are a civilian vessel carrying only students and teachers. We have no weapons or military technology." The response came in accented but clear galactic standard. "We are the Void Hunters. Your ship is now our property. Surrender all valuables and prepare to be boarded for inspection." We will comply," the captain said, sounding defeated. But Minji knew this was part of the plan they had discussed. Make the raiders think they had won easily. Let them become confident and careless. The next wave of Void Hunters entered through 3 different airlocks simultaneously. 40 or 50 of them, enough to overwhelm any normal resistance. They moved through the ship with the casual confidence of predators who had never encountered real opposition. Minji let them penetrate deep into the ship before she began the next phase. Using Unit 47's maintenance access, she started shutting down artificial gravity in specific sections. Raiders who had been walking on the floor suddenly found themselves floating helplessly near the ceiling. In other areas, she increased the gravity to twice normal, making it difficult for the tall, thin hunters to move quickly. Their equipment was designed for zero-gravity raids, not for fighting in variable conditions. The lights went out completely in some corridors while others became blindingly bright. Temperature controls began making sections of the ship very hot or very cold. Nothing dangerous, but everything uncomfortable and confusing. Most importantly, she began making noise. Footsteps in empty corridors, voices calling for help from sealed areas, doors slamming shut with no one visible nearby. The Void Hunters had expected an easy raid on helpless victims. Instead, they found themselves in a ship that seemed to be fighting back on its own. "What is happening?" she heard one raider shout to another. "The ship's systems are malfunctioning," came the reply. "Or someone is controlling them." Impossible. Scans showed only students and teachers. No military personnel. But Minji was not military personnel. She was something the Void Hunters had never encountered before. A human teenager who thought like a predator instead of prey. She moved through the maintenance tunnels and service corridors, always staying ahead of the searchers. When they tried to follow her, they found passages blocked by debris or filled with harmless but annoying repair foam. The raiders were becoming frustrated. This was taking too long. Their usual tactics were not working. Through the ship's sensors, Minji could see more hunter ships approaching. The first raid was supposed to be quick and easy. When it took too long, they would send reinforcements. But reinforcements meant the Hunter Prime would come aboard personally, the leader of the pack who would take charge of the operation. Minji had read about Void Hunters in the ship's database. They were pack predators like wolves. They followed the strongest leader and relied on group tactics. But that also meant they had a weakness. If the pack leader was beaten, the rest would lose confidence. She made her way to the central core where Captain Nexlar and the others were waiting. "How much longer can you keep this up?" the captain asked when she slipped through the sealed door. Not much longer, Minji admitted. They are bringing more ships, bigger ones. Around her, the alien students and faculty looked at her with new understanding. This small human girl had been fighting off trained raiders for hours, using nothing but the ship's maintenance systems and her own clever thinking. What do we do now? Asked Professor Quelex. Minji looked at the faces around her. Scared, but no longer helpless. They had seen that it was possible to fight back. Now we get ready for the real battle, she said. Because their leader is coming. And when he gets here, we are going to show him what happens when you hunt humans. Outside, the massive Hunter Prime ship was docking with the Academy vessel. Soon everything would change. The Hunter Prime was enormous, nearly 8 feet tall with armor that looked like it was made from the bones of defeated enemies. When he stepped aboard the Academy ship, his presence seemed to make the air itself feel heavy and dangerous. Minji watched him through the ship's internal cameras as he surveyed the chaos his raiders had reported. Trapped hunters covered in fire suppression foam, others floating helplessly in zero-gravity sections. Equipment scattered and damaged throughout the ship. What has happened here? The Hunter Prime demanded in his deep, growling voice. The ship's systems are fighting back, one of his subordinates reported. Every corridor is trapped, every room is defended. Impossible. These are soft Academy students, they know nothing of war. But the Hunter Prime's voice carried a note of uncertainty. In hundreds of raids, he had never encountered anything like this. Minji knew this was her moment. She had been studying the Hunter Prime through the cameras, watching how he moved, learning his patterns. Now she needed to separate him from his pack. Unit 47, she whispered to the maintenance android. Can you make it look like someone is trapped in the engine room? I can generate appropriate distress signals and life signs, the android confirmed. Make it look like someone important is hiding there. Within minutes, the ship's sensors began reporting a single life form in the heavily shielded engine compartment. The reading suggested it was alone and frightened, exactly the kind of easy target the Hunter Prime would want to claim personally. There, he told his raiders, pointing toward the engine section. One survivor hiding like a coward. I will take this one myself. This was exactly what Minji had hoped for. Pack predators like the Void Hunters were stronger as a group, but individuals could be beaten if you understood their psychology. The Hunter Prime made his way toward the engine room, leaving most of his raiders behind to secure other areas of the ship. Minji followed him through the maintenance passages, staying just out of sight. When he reached the engine room, the Hunter Prime found it empty, except for humming machinery and flickering displays. The life signs had been fake, generated by Unit 47's clever programming. Show yourself, coward, the Hunter Prime roared. I know you are here. But Minji was not hiding like a coward. She was hunting. She had studied every detail of the engine room layout. She knew which passages led where, which systems could be used as weapons, and most importantly, how to move through the area without being detected. The Hunter Prime was bigger and stronger than her. His armor could probably stop most weapons. His claws and teeth marked him as a natural predator from whatever world had spawned his species. But Minji had advantages he did not understand. She was patient, she was quiet, and she never stopped moving. For the next hour, she led the Hunter Prime through a maze of corridors and chambers, always staying just out of reach, always making just enough noise to keep him following, never letting him rest or think clearly. Every few minutes, she would trigger some new annoyance. A blast of steam from a maintenance pipe, a sudden change in lighting that temporarily blinded him, doors that sealed shut just as he tried to pass through them. The Hunter Prime became more and more frustrated. He was used to quick, decisive battles where his size and strength won easily. He had never faced an enemy who refused to fight directly. Face me, he shouted into the empty corridors. Stop running like prey. But Minji was not running like prey. She was hunting like a human. On Earth, her ancestors had not been the biggest or strongest predators. They had been persistence hunters. They wore down their enemies over time, never giving them a chance to rest or recover. They made the prey animal run until it was exhausted, then closed in for the final strike. The Hunter Prime was getting tired. His heavy armor, designed to intimidate enemies in quick battles, was becoming a burden during this long chase. His breathing was becoming labored. His movements were getting slower and less coordinated. Meanwhile, Minji felt more focused with each passing minute. The long hunt was not wearing her down. It was energizing her. Every instinct inherited from millions of years of human evolution was telling her that the prey was weakening. Finally, in a narrow maintenance corridor deep in the ship's heart, the Hunter Prime stopped running. "Enough games," he snarled, pulling out a massive energy weapon. "I will burn down this entire section until I find you." But when he raised the weapon, nothing happened. The energy cells were dead. Minji had been using Unit 47 to drain power from any equipment the Hunter Prime carried. His armor's systems were failing, his weapons were useless, even his breathing apparatus was starting to malfunction. What are you?" the Hunter Prime gasped, finally understanding that he was not the predator in this situation. Minji stepped out of the shadows where she had been waiting. She looked small and harmless compared to the massive alien warrior, but her eyes held a calm certainty that made the Hunter Prime step backward. "I am human," she said simply, "and you made a mistake when you decided to hunt us." The Hunter Prime tried to charge at her, but he was exhausted, and his failing armor made him clumsy. Minji simply stepped aside and triggered the emergency bulkhead behind him. The massive door slammed shut, sealing the Hunter Prime in a small maintenance chamber. "Unit 47, lock down that section and reduce oxygen to minimum safe levels," she ordered. The trapped Hunter Prime pounded on the sealed door, but his strength was already fading as the thin air made him dizzy and weak. Throughout the ship, his raiders heard their leader's defeat through their communication systems. The great Hunter Prime, who had never been beaten, was trapped and helpless. The psychological effect was immediate. Void hunters were pack predators who followed strength. When their leader failed, their confidence collapsed. Some of the raiders tried to rescue their chief, but they found themselves facing not just Minji, but other humans who had learned from her example. Jiho had used his species' natural speed to help evacuate injured students to safety. Hana applied her intelligence to coordinate the defense systems. Unit 47 was operating. Dongyun used his diplomatic training to convince some raiders to surrender rather than fight. But it was Sunwoo who surprised everyone the most. His people's empathic abilities let him sense the raiders' growing fear and uncertainty. He began projecting those emotions back at them, amplifying their panic until some void hunters simply dropped their weapons and fled. Even quiet Yuna found her courage, using her engineering skills to seal off sections of the ship and trap raiders in dead-end corridors. What had started as a desperate defense by one isolated human girl had become a coordinated effort by students who had learned to work together. The remaining void hunters began retreating to their ships. Without their leaders' confidence to guide them, they became confused and disorganized. Some fought each other in their panic to escape. In less than an hour, the legendary Void Hunter fleet was fleeing from a disabled academy ship crewed by students. Minji stood in the observation deck, watching the raider ships disappear into the darkness between stars. Around her, alien students and faculty looked at her with new understanding. She was still the human girl who sat alone in the corner, but now they knew what that really meant. Humans did not give up. They did not surrender. When things looked hopeless, they found a way to fight back even when logic said it was impossible, and sometimes that made all the difference. The rescue fleet arrived 2 days later to find the Academy ship Luminous Dawn intact and operational. Captain Nexlar had managed to restore basic systems using repair techniques that Unit 47 learned from watching Minji work with simple tools. But the real surprise came when the rescue commanders tried to understand what had happened. "You defeated a Void Hunter raid?" Admiral Korvash asked in disbelief. "With Academy students? The human girl organized our defense," Captain Nexlar explained. "She turned our own ship into a weapon against the raiders." The story spread through the galactic communication networks faster than light speed. A human teenager, isolated and underestimated, had done what trained military forces had failed to do for centuries. She had beaten the Void Hunters using nothing but clever thinking and determination. When the Luminous Dawn returned to Nexus Prime, Everything was different. Minji walked into her advanced galactic history class to find students arguing over who got to sit next to her. The corner desk was still there, but now it was surrounded by eager faces instead of empty space. "Minji," called out Hana, the brilliant Centaurian girl. "I saved you a seat right here." "No, sit with us," said Jiho, gesturing to a group near the front. "We want to hear more about human tactical thinking." Sunwoo approached more quietly. His empathic abilities let him sense emotions, and he could feel that all the attention was overwhelming for someone who had spent weeks alone. "Maybe she just wants to sit where she is comfortable," he suggested gently. Minji looked around at all the faces watching her. A few weeks ago, these same students had avoided her like she carried some kind of disease. Now they wanted to be her friend. But she realized she was not angry about their earlier treatment. They had been afraid of what they did not understand. And fear made people do stupid things sometimes. "I like my corner seat," she said with a small smile. "But maybe some of you could sit nearby if you want to." The transformation was not just in her classroom. Throughout the academy, everything had changed. Principal Vorlak called her to his office, but this time it was not to scold her or explain her limitations. "The Galactic Defense Council has requested a meeting with you," he said, his usually stern expression showing something like pride. "They want to understand human military thinking." "I am not military," Minji protested. "I am just a student." "Yes," Vorlak agreed. "A student who defeated enemies that have terrorized space travel for generations. They are very interested in how your mind works." More changes came quickly. The Academy added new courses in alternative, strategic thinking, and asymmetric defense theory. Other schools across the galaxy requested human exchange students. Military academies that had never accepted non-military species began asking for human applicants. But the biggest change was in the students themselves. Donghyun approached Minji after their diplomatic negotiations class. "I have been thinking about what you said, about people fighting to prove they are strong instead of fighting for resources. It was just an idea," Minji said. "But it was right," he continued. "My people's diplomatic methods work well with logical species, but we have never known how to deal with emotional motivations. Could you teach us?" Similar conversations happened throughout the academy. Students who had dismissed human thinking as primitive began to realize it filled gaps in their own knowledge. Yuna asked for help understanding how to build things when you did not have perfect materials. Hana wanted to learn about intuitive problem-solving that did not rely on pure calculation. Jiho was fascinated by the concept of persistence hunting and how it applied to long-term strategy. The corner seat was no longer a place of isolation. It became the center of the most interesting discussions in every class. But perhaps the most important change was in the teachers. Instructor Zelan approached Minji after a particularly lively debate about ancient warfare tactics. "I owe you an apology," he said, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated embarrassment. "I assumed your species was limited because your technology was simple. I did not understand that intelligence comes in many forms." "You were not wrong," Minji replied. "Humans are not as advanced as other species. We just think differently." "That is exactly the point," Zelan said. "Different thinking is not inferior thinking. It is just different. And sometimes, different is exactly what we need." 3 months later, Minji received a message from Earth. Her acceptance to the Academy had been part of a cultural exchange program, but now the Galactic Council wanted to make it permanent. They offered full membership to humanity in the galactic community, with immediate access to advanced technology and education. The message was from her father, a career military officer who had taught her about tactics and strategy during their camping trips. "I always knew you were special, kiddo," his recorded message said. "I just never imagined you would be special enough to change how an entire galaxy thinks about humans. Your mother and I are proud of you. Come home when you are ready, but know that you have opened doors for all of humanity." Minji watched the message 3 times before responding. When she did, her reply was simple. "I think I will stay a little longer, Dad." I am finally learning things I never knew I wanted to know. And I think I am teaching things too. The truth was, she had found something at the academy that she had not expected to find. Not just acceptance, but understanding. Her classmates no longer saw her as strange or primitive. They saw her as different in ways that made their own thinking better. During her final class of the day, Professor Qualex announced a new assignment. "We will be studying the hegemony wars again," he said. "But this time, I want you to work in mixed groups. Each group must include students from at least 3 different worlds with different ways of thinking." Minji found herself paired with Hana, whose people solved problems through pure logic, and Sunwoo, whose species understood emotional motivations. The combination seemed unlikely, but that was exactly the point. "How do we analyze a battle when we all see it differently?" Hana asked. "Maybe that is how we get the right answer," Minji suggested, "by seeing it from all angles." As they worked together, something remarkable happened. Hana's logical analysis revealed weak points in military formations that Minji's tactical thinking could exploit. Sunwoo's emotional understanding explained why certain strategies succeeded or failed based on the morale of the troops involved. None of them could have solved the problem alone. But together they found solutions that were better than anything any single species could have discovered. After class, Minji walked through the academy corridors that had once felt so lonely and intimidating. Now they felt like home. Students nodded to her as she passed. Teachers asked her opinions on difficult problems. She was no longer the strange human girl who sat in the corner, but she still chose to sit in that corner seat during classes. Not because she was isolated, but because it gave her the best view of everything happening around her, and because it reminded her of something important. Being different was not a weakness to overcome. It was a strength to embrace. That evening, she stood in her room looking at the image of Earth on her wall. Tomorrow, representatives from a dozen worlds would arrive to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. The galaxy had spent centuries afraid of the species that never stopped hunting, never gave up, never quit fighting. Now they understood that those same qualities made humans the perfect allies when facing impossible odds. Minji touched her father's dog tags, still hanging around her neck. She had worn them every day since arriving at the academy, a reminder of where she came from and what her people had endured to reach the stars. Soon, other humans would join her at the academy. They would bring their own strange ways of thinking, their own solutions to problems that seemed impossible, and the galaxy would be better for it. She smiled as she prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that different thinking was exactly what the universe needed. The corner seat had taught her that being alone was not the same as being isolated, and being different was not the same as being wrong. Sometimes it was exactly what everyone needed, even when they did not know it yet. The human girl who had once sat alone now sat at the center of a new kind of education, one that valued all ways of thinking. And the galaxy was finally learning what humanity had always known. The best solutions came not from being the strongest or the smartest, but from never giving up and always finding another way forward, even when everyone else thought it was impossible.